Fáilte roimh a chuirde fiachna ó Breanáin is einnim domsa agus is cúis anmhór áthais dom a bheith I bhur láthair inniu mar R&T is chuirde glundar orm. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a huge source of delight to me to be invited here to Áras an Uachtaráin to MC this afternoon's proceedings. We're gathered to celebrate communities from the sporting world and from the world of animal welfare, two areas of life that foster cooperation and team spirit, empathy and kindness. And we'll be hearing some incredible music very shortly from a host of extraordinary music makers. And before I invite Uachtaráin na hÉireann to speak with you, I just want to take a moment, as someone who has had the honour of emceeing several garden parties over the years, and indeed performing on this very stage with my own band, Hot As Flowers, on many, many joyous occasions. I want to express my own personal gratitude to Sabina for her unendingly warm welcome, and for always getting us up dancing, and of course to Uachtaráin na hÉireann for his extraordinary work not only as our Uachtaráin, but as an incredible humanitarian, as a poet, as a remarkable cultural advocate for our country, and a great, great man with whom I've had the pleasure of having many interactions over almost 4 decades. Uachtaráin, go raibh míle maith agat féin. Agus in isise chuirde, chuir mis fáilte ribh Uachtaráin na hÉireann Mícheál D. ó Higgins.
Ar an géadtha seas fíorcin fúilte rómhiliúg don cúisir seo agus ar mo hána héin agus a sama bhean céile sáithim. Fearim fíorcin fúilte mar go fúilte céile rómhiliúg. Na bhailiúcháin seo tugann siad seans de saibhínis mé héin cáasú le daoine atá ag gobar seachtain in íoc seachtain go minic chur abracha dúnacha ach go háirithe is tá bailin trónóna linn tá iad san a rinne atá really an méid atá deanta achasan ar san cuasaí sport tá fáilte spéisial tar ó san. The garden parties, and this is our final series that Sabina and I are organising since 2011. But you are all so welcome because the garden parties have given us an opportunity. Some people write in, other people are in different groups and different activities. But very much they're all people working towards an effective citizenship, encouraging others in areas of, for example, good health, sometimes dealing with those who have different kinds of vulnerabilities. Or go háirithe bíonn fáilte spéisial de riad sanna tá gobar ar leas cosmuinte na tíre seo. We are very, very much, I just want to, so many people here that I recognise, fi fiachna cant mar háncla an méid a rinne a sarat tábh mar Uachtaráin na hÉireann. It's 30 years ago since I was Minister for Arts, Culture and the Gaeltacht the first, and I'm delighted that Danny Coffig is here in Wintering Coffig. Shona Coffig and I started that department, and I have to say that all of the work on the environment and all of the work in relationship to the sending the structural funds at that particular time owed to his ceaseless work, so Fóilte Creedra. Quidnem Gominic Sean, and he was one of the most wonderful people to work with in the partnership we had 30 years ago. I also think as well is that sometimes there is a special welcome for all of the people who are involved in sport. I think this particular garden party is concentrated as those who work in communities. We call it a community garden party because people are working in communities in different ways. The important thing about community is, I think, that the people in it have taken a decision to work beyond themselves and beyond their own self-interest. The beneficiaries are in fact beyond the self. So I want to say that sometimes it tends to be forgotten in relation to sports that we have got used to seeing on television, that the sport itself exists because of people who are working day after day, week after week, on making it possible with younger players, and that is just so. It wasn't Rupert Murdoch, for example, who made football. It was, in fact, actually the thousands of families who washed jerseys and who delivered children to weekends and collected them and so forth, and to those of us who know a bit about that. I just think it is very important that in today all of the clubs in the League of Ireland are represented, so forth is special to Rev the League. I say very much often when people ask me my opinions about the matters of football, I said it is the league that matters rather than anything else, which is a message that needs to go right to the top, I think, of football. I think as well, in particular, there are friends of mine, I see Bernie O'Connell, and there's many other. Bernie has been my liaison with Galway United, of which I had the honour to be president in my time, of which I still support, and my good friend Alan Murphy, who in such a long time was my managing the team. I've had the pleasure of attending United Go-Out. I have to say, it's my advanced age. I was vice president of Galway Rovers, which preceded Galway United. And when I went to Galway at the age of 19, I just travelled to what was then called the Swamp with Tom O'Connell to see them play. Then after that, in many, many cases, I was involved in contentious days and normal days in relation to Galway United, which I think is very interesting that Bernie O'Connell is here, fortunately Bernie Keane as well, because we have had a commentary in the Irish language available for Galway United's games because of the commitment of Bernie very, very much to the Gaelic fame. Since I've come to Galway to Áras an Uachtaráin, I have to tell you, I'm positioned between two clubs, Dalymount Park and Richmond Park. I think that technically speaking, Dalymount Park is slightly closer, but I do want to pay tribute to Bohemians, not only for their very, very strong community connections, and not only community connections in Dublin, but their great international solidarity. And I have to say, at the risk of my life to say, I thought the game against Rovers the other night was a great game of football. But I also have that during my presidency I've initiated both the President's Cup but also the President's Cup for women's football, which I think is of immense significance in Athlone and in Shelburne. Now, I have to say as well is that maybe one of the most memorable matches that I attended, and it's something that I have to complete, was the game between Bohemians and the Palestinian women's national team at Dalymount Park. And I think it's something about the way that our lives hang together and making sense and showing compassion, showing care, is the atmosphere that night when people who realised that even it was so far away that what was happening in Gaza and the West Bank was something that they shared, and was very, very encouraging to have to remember of all those killed in Gaza at the moment, 44% are in fact children, and if you add women in, it is something nearly 70%. And I have had every garden party this year, I've expressed how difficult I've had found it to be speaking about other things when I have been following the detail of what is happening. For example, people being shot, usual figures of up to 50 people, while in fact they were looking for bread. So you have a choice of starvation or a choice of, and that has to, there's a meeting of the Council of the heads of the European Union today, and I have conveyed my view that an hour is too long for this to go on. It has to stop. And I think that you get an idea of the scale of it. Yesterday, I met Tedros, who is the head of the WHO, the World Health Organization of the United Nations. When the United Nations was distributing food, it was distributed through 400 outlets. What at the moment is you have a private organisation that has that is responsible to nobody, in fact operating 4 centres to which people have in fact to walk huge distances because people have been dispossessed so often in Palestine. And then as they do, not less than a dozen every single day since it has gone on, has been shot while they sought bread for their families and children. And as President of Ireland, it gives me great pleasure to know that whenever I've been speaking on that issue, it has the support of people in Ireland who sent their children from their families to keep peace in southern Lebanon as so often as peacekeepers. And peace is what we must now seek to achieve, not only in that part of the world, but in our own hearts and in the world and also in the international institutions. Now, moving on to matters, I said we have the representatives of all the different clubs in the league here. Now, it's one of the most dangerous occupations being a coach. Everybody recognises that, and I think, but most importantly as well, even I remember when our children were going to the underage games and so forth. There are people, as I have said, and I want to express my gratitude and appreciation to them. There are the people who have kept it all going. There are times when clubs go up and go down. I remember, for example, when I was visit Sligo, and I said at half-time, the confections are remarkably good. Well, that was because they had 2 bakeries among their 14 different people who were contributing to the welfare of the club. At that particular time, it was the Leeson period, I think, in Galway United, which I won't say too much about because... And now I also think as well that those who coach, those who steward, those who mark the pitches, for example, the pitch in Terryland has often been spoken about its quality and so forth, and that is due to the person who looks after that in a very, very dedicated way. And all that is invaluable work, and these are acts of great civic virtue. I also think that what I think is that we are represented today by a number of very significant people who are interested in animals. It is a kind of very abstract to suggest, but every now and again, as you see, the great human failures in relation to war and inequity, starvation, global poverty, it's as a species within other species. The human species has in fact done enormous damage to the environment and the planet that we might want to leave on to the future. But also we have a responsibility for biodiversity, and we have a responsibility now as they come under attack to keep the Sustainable Development Goals and to fight for them and so forth. I think that I'm so pleased that the ISPCA are here, the Dogs Trust, Donkey Sanctuary, National Parks and Wildlife Service, MODRA, the Irish Blue Cross, Hungry Horse Outside, Seal Rescue Ireland, and all of the others who are working with the different species that are in need. I do want to say that in relation to that, it's a very, very long time since we had that a long time ago people found it necessary to have legislation to protect animals. But unfortunately, there are those who acquire, as they said, ownership of animals, but unfortunately there's the number who have been abandoned and the number who have been badly cared for, I think, are on the increase, and that's why those particular organisations and the people who give their time and their care for that, I do thank them. My previous dog Broad used to accompany me on these speeches here, but my young dog Mishnach now is in fact not used to large crowds due to his own experiences during COVID. But that doesn't matter. I do want to thank all of you, those who give care to those animals. As I said, it was in County Galway that Richard Martin in 1824 brought in the treatment of horses and cattle bill, which was the first protection for animals. I have to say something personal about all of watching television and mentioning the different themes that I have mentioned so far. I have been struck by a particular image. During the British Protectorate in Palestine and Egypt, there is a reference in Shanachas Connemara to Lán and Ossip, the Day of the Asses, which was a time when there were a whole series of asses were exported to handle for the war. As you know, one of the least known things in relation to war in general were the number of horses who were killed, the number of animals, etc. But in this case, it was the asses who were exported. And I sometimes look on at the television and I see this small animal harnessed, and it is pulling all the remains of people with their furniture, their bits and pieces, from people who have been displaced maybe more than a dozen times. And as a poet, I have to say, people sometimes say to me, and I do, and one of the poems that I did have a very long time ago in one of my collections was a poem called The Ass. And I wrote in it, I recall the soft velvet of his ears, as he bent in habit for the winkers, the resignation too, of his taking the bit past the surrender of his yellow teeth. The cross upon his back conferred no sacred status, more a reminder of a burden carried, nor did it guarantee the paring of his hooves. The head of an ass, the woe mother of a cow, the arrogant snort of a horse, the exhausted pant of a dog, the sharp cuts of a green fern, the precious blue of bog iris, the wonder of stranded eels, the rush of water in gully and ditch. What is it of those images that makes them endure past a time of catastrophe, the slow death of a house where the thatch has given in? It is a special intimacy, perhaps allowed in fields, that lodges them as seed in memory. On those rare occasions when he's broke from trot to gallop, I sewed with him past order before the tug on the reins, and I never hurried at the untackling, nor did I begrudge him his freedom recovered. More than an image lost, it is a companion I seek to recover. When I wrote that, I remember now, when I look at the images, I have in work that I have underway at the present time, I sometimes see these small children catching the wet side of the winkers of an ass as they're carrying these huge loads. And I often constructed an image of what they must say. What if the child said to the parent, isn't that, do you think they will kill the asses as well? And that's why I think people in communities, why you have a community day, and think, is you have to be able to take the full vulnerability of the world, wherever it is. And if you are speaking of humanity, of taking all of these challenges into oneself, both at home and abroad. I think that one of the things that is interesting as well is the great sociability in Ireland as I finish after 14 years as president. And I do want to say thank you to all those groups, walking groups, community groups, ICAs, Macron Firma, all of those, and the warmth and the welcome that they have given to Sabina and I. But what is great is to see what they're doing for each other and the conversations that they had, because we don't live on material things alone. If tá áthas an downarum go bhfuil fiachna ó Branán ag fan ó Mariam C. Tronona. I'm so pleased that Fiachna Brennan is going to be looking after matters this afternoon. I want to just, my very last thing, to thank every one of you. Tá brodarum faoin aimse. There are some things the President can't control, including delivering us a law product that has turned into law bostach. But think about, I think one of the things that for all of you, and particularly the rich, diverse society that is now happening in Ireland. Just imagine that in the wealthiest country in the world, companies have been asked to make sure that in their manifestos and terms of reference, they must remove DEI. That is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now that is a real fall back into a dreadful, dreadful kind of version of humanity. But here you all are representing groups that are meeting each other, talking to each other, walking with each other, caring for each other, and particularly all those who are working with, I've told you, whether it is one species or the human species with sport. There are some people I want to thank in particular. I should say that both Sabina and I wouldn't have been able to offer any of these garden parties over all of the years if it hadn't been for the enthusiastic positivity of the staff in Oris and Uachtaráin, who provide all of this. I want to thank the OPW, I want to thank the Guardian, I want to thank all of those who have assisted us over the years. Now, we're going to have a splendid afternoon at Fiachna. We'll introduce the thanks to harpist Fiona Grayson, TBLA are outside in the Plotton Lawn, Flacco na Hairan in the Orchestra Club, Piper Liam Winnett, Julie Massa, Swing Version, Shash Keen, Keela, Ronan Osnatig, Miles O'Reilly, and Miles, you're particularly welcome. I have a bit of a project going there with Cladder Records and then. And may I thank all the volunteers present, all of those, in fact, as well, the children of St. John of Gauls, the first aiders, everyone who has been, in fact, of assistance to us. In the end of the day, after the 14 years, Oris and Uachtaráin is the home of the presidents of Ireland, which it is always to be. I think that during the last 14 years, the house and the grounds have been filled with music and singing and so on, and we have offered memorials to people who had been perhaps forgotten in historiography, women in history, Sean O'Casey, sculptures and so forth. But the important thing, it isn't there for us. It is there for you, all of you, Muintir na Hairan. And that is why, enjoy as much as you can every moment of the music, but also of the grounds and the house. Mar good me, tá firkin fodro ta sulam. Gomwena shift changan of Osan Tranona, is gwyn gograr in e wan don Tranona, ac don tau ki. Dar backert, gorma, get back.